Are you disappointed by your pictures because the quality looks like this? Or the colors look like this? Or they're simply too light or too dark, and you just want them to look good, like this? My name is Paul, and this is Exposure Therapy. I've taught group photography workshops for the past 3 years, and in this video I'll discuss 3 common problems encountered by beginners and what you can do to fix them. The first problem relates to picture quality and resolution, and it's the easiest to fix. If you're noticing that your high megapixel camera isn't producing photos with the level of detail you're expecting, you have an issue with picture resolution. Resolution affects how closely you can crop or zoom into your picture on your computer, tablet, or phone before you start noticing obvious pixelation. In this example, you're seeing 2 versions of the same picture. The left one was saved at my camera's highest resolution, so 24 megapixels, and the right one using a lower setting. Notice how I can't zoom as closely to the image on the right, and when I force it, we see pixelation instead of the fine detail. The solution is to go into your camera's picture settings, which on most cameras is located at the top or leftmost side of the menu list, and ensure your selection is set to the largest resolution, which is most commonly designated as large or with the letter L. This tells your camera to save your pictures using the full resolution of your image sensor so that you're using all of the megapixels you've paid for. In addition to resolution, your camera also lets you choose between different image quality settings. This affects how much data compression your files undergo. More compression can produce images that show visible blockiness, artifacts, and color degradation, as you can see here, especially around contrasty edges or areas of flat detail. In this example, you're again seeing 2 versions of the same picture. Both were saved at the same resolution but with different quality settings. The photo on the right was saved using lower quality than the picture on the left, and upon closer inspection, it shows some degradation, which isn't ideal. To make sure this doesn't happen, you should go back into your camera's picture settings and select the highest quality JPEG that's available. This is typically described using words like fine, extra fine, or the letter F. The high quality settings on Canon cameras is shown with a smooth curved quarter circle. Your camera is now set to record photos using its highest resolution and best JPEG quality. Keep in mind that picture settings are what I call persistent, meaning that you don't need to worry about repeating this process every time you turn on your camera. They'll persist until you change them. Now, let's tackle the second common problem, which relates to color. You've experienced a poor color balance if you've ever taken a photo that appears to have a cooler or warmer color cast than you remember seeing with your eyes. This sometimes happens when you're taking pictures of largely monochromatic scenes, like those in which a single color is the dominant hue, or when you're taking pictures in dim indoor lights. Such situations cause your camera to misinterpret the color of the light, and you end up with poor color balance. You can easily avoid such mistakes by telling your camera the correct color of the scene's primary light source. This is a 2-step process. First, you'll have to step out of the comfort of full automatic mode and into program shooting mode, which is a fully automatic exposure mode that gives you access to several features that were previously unavailable. You can shift between modes using the shooting mode dial, which is located on the top of most cameras. Here it is on my 11-year-old Canon 7D. Now that you're in program mode, you can make changes to how your camera interprets the color of light sources. The setting you're looking to adjust is called white balance, which is often labeled WB on advanced cameras for beginners. Here's the white balance button on my old 7D, and here's how it's accessed via the on-screen quick menu. If you've never explored this setting, its default setting is labeled AWB for auto white balance. Auto white balance generally provides adequate results in scenes featuring a variety of colors. Beyond that, many cameras let you choose from several white balance presets designed to match commonly encountered lighting conditions. The most common presets are shade for when your subject is lit by blue skylight, cloudy for when your photos are taken under overcast conditions, daylight for when your subject is in direct afternoon sunlight, tungsten for subjects in indoor light, and flash for when you're using your camera's built-in flash or a speed light that's mounted to your camera's hot shoe, which is this part on cameras that have it. The fluorescent presets found on modern cameras are at best only approximations for the huge variety of fluorescent and LED lights on the market, so pick these with caution and don't expect perfection. Your camera may also have a preset labeled K and one called Custom, whose label is an icon that looks something like this. These are more advanced options that I'll discuss in a later video. For now, the presets I described above, shade, cloudy, daylight, flash, fluorescent, and tungsten, should help you get great photos with consistently accurate colors in situations when auto white balance has the potential to be inaccurate. Of course, I don't want to imply that auto white balance is always bad. It's not. It has a place. However, you will almost always get better results when you pick a preset that matches the scene's lighting, assuming of course that your camera has an appropriate preset. Keep in mind, if you go back to using auto mode instead of program mode, you'll lose the ability to select white balance presets. Let's take a look at an example of what white balance looks like when it's wrong and when it's right. This is a simulated example, but it illustrates the concept just the same. The photo on the left was taken with auto white balance, and my camera incorrectly read the scene as daylight, which is a setting intended to match direct afternoon sunlight. My grandmother was sitting by a large window, and although it was sunny outside, direct sunlight wasn't the main source of light. Her face was illuminated by the skylight streaming in through the window. That's why the scene as shot looks too cool and produces skin tones that are almost gray. Skylight is cooler than daylight. Changing the camera's interpretation of the scene to shade, which is the correct setting for subjects lit by the blue sky, produces much more authentic and pleasing colors. Remember, this was a simulated example, and in reality, you'd have to make the right selection before taking the picture. By the way, white balance is a creative choice as much as a technical setting. The right white balance setting won't always be the one most closely matching to the light. It will sometimes be the one that produces the results you like most, so feel free to experiment. The last common problem that many beginners encounter is inaccurate auto exposures. These are often experienced as photos that come out too dark or too bright in comparison to what you saw with your eyes, or perhaps what you were hoping for. Fortunately, there's a very simple and intuitive way to nudge the camera's auto exposure in the right direction. This is done using a function called exposure compensation. Similar to white balance, exposure compensation doesn't work in auto mode, so you'll have to set your camera to P mode to use it. On many beginner DSLRs and mirrorless cameras, exposure compensation is set by pushing the button labeled exposure compensation, which looks like this, and then rotating your camera's main dial. Rotating the dial either adds or subtracts the amount of compensation, which is typically expressed using positive or negative numbers in your viewfinder or on the main screen. Positive numbers instruct your cameras to make brighter auto exposures, and negative numbers instruct your camera to make darker auto exposures. As a rule of thumb, very bright scenes and subjects require a positive adjustment, while those that are dark require a negative adjustment. Now let's take a look at a simulated example of exposure compensation. In this photo of a white dog on snow, the dominance of light tones throughout the scene fooled the camera into thinking that there's too much light and that it should reduce its exposure. Being smarter than the camera, we know that both the dog and the snow should look white, not gray. So for this scene of a bright subject, adding positive exposure compensation produces a much more desirable and authentic result. And once again, this is an example. In the field, you'd make the adjustments before taking the picture. Bear in mind that exposure compensation is a persistent setting that stays in the position you last placed it even after turning the camera off. To avoid accidentally sabotaging your next series of pictures, it's good practice to reset it to 0 before turning off the camera. Now you know how to recognize and remedy the 3 most common mistakes made by new photographers. If you have requests for future topics, let me know in the comments below and I'll address them in future videos. In the meantime, you can learn more about photography at exposuretherapy.ca. See you next time.